of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, 42nd Parliament, pursuant to order of reference of Wednesday, November 28, 2018. We are continuing a study of challenges facing flight schools in Canada. So I welcome you all here today. This is our new meeting room here in Centre Block, and our first meeting here. And we're also joined over and above the committee members, the mover of the motion, Mr. Fuhr, is with us as well today. So welcome. So on to our witnesses. We have Aero Lasurs, Caroline Farley, Chief Pilot and Chief Instructor. Welcome. Air Canada Pilots Association, Captain Mike Hoff, External Affairs Committee. And Carson Air, Mark Vandergen, Flight School Director, Southern Interior Flight Center. And Mr. Vandergen, would you like to begin? 5 minutes, please. I'll raise my hand when the 5 minutes is getting to a close.
Sure.
Right,
thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, and thank you for the invitation to participate today. I'm going to be reading from my notes here because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Just a little bit about us. Southern Interior Flight Center is a part of Carson Group of Companies, which provides flight training in Kelowna, BC, and medevac, freight, and fuel and hangar services in Kelowna, Calgary, Vancouver, and Abbotsford. We get to face the challenges related to the pilot shortage in all aspects, not just training, but that's the focus for today. At the flight school level, we train students to become recreational, general commercial, airline, and instructor pilots, and have a commercial aviation diploma program with Okanagan College. We have formal training partnerships with WestJet Encore, Jazz, Porter, Carson Air, as well as other informal connections with many companies seeking our graduates. As to the challenges, some of these you will recognize from previous meetings. First, there's an inadequate financial assistance for students. The high cost of initial training for commercial pilot's license combined with low funding leaves students deeply in debt. Available student loan assistance combined through Canada Student Loans and BC Student Loans, for example, in our province, is a mere $5,440 per semester. Pair this against a demonstrated need of $23,519 per semester, and this means that a typical unmet need in this is $18,000 for each semester, or over $90,000 of unmet need for a 5-semester diploma program. Second, we are facing increasing training costs. To acquire instructor staff, we now have to train flight instructors at our burden of $10,000 per instructor. This used to be a revenue stream generated from commercial pilots who wanted to instruct, and has instead become a cost that now is to be passed along to the general flight training student group, increasing their financial burden. The cost of aircraft parts and fuel are also unstable and increasing significantly. For example, a single-engine Cessna 172 aircraft new from the factory is currently $411,000 US and requires a lead time of 14 months for delivery. Used aircraft result in bidding wars and still run 50 to 75% of new costs before adding in the high cost of overhauling major components like engines and propellers. Not only is the domestic training demand fueling aircraft sales and prices, but international companies have been purchasing aircraft in groups of 25 or more for their own training use overseas. In addition to increasing the costs through those means, the pool of aircraft maintenance engineers is also depleting, requiring higher pay and incentives to attract and retain qualified maintenance personnel. Our third challenge is our general lack of access to potential staff. With the current state of hiring in the industry, new pilots do not need to spend time instructing to build experience to move to commercial operators. Many graduates are going straight to airlines or other companies directly out of flight school. The lower availability of instructors equals fewer instructors who advance through the instructor class system in order to become supervising instructors or to be able to train new instructors. For a temporary solution, qualified international applicants for instructor positions are not viable options to us, as the current LMIA process is overly onerous, and the lengthy Transport Canada license conversion process also holds up the administrative processing of international applicants. Medical requirements are also overly restricted in some circumstances. For example, when dealing with correctable color blindness or when preventing retired airline pilots who no longer hold medicals from teaching in a simulator for us like they are already able to do at the airlines. So to counter that, our recommendations fall into two groups. First, we need more aviation-specific funding. I think that's pretty clear. We need to increase federal funding in the way of additional student loans and loan forgiveness programs for students. We need to look at federal funding support in the way of instructor craft training or retention grants to help alleviate the financial burden passed along to the students. We also need to look at federal funding or tax credits for capital purchases to also help cover the extremely high and increasing equipment costs. The second group of recommendations refers to the being able to increase access to instructor staff. First, an increase in student funding would allow flight training units to pay instructor and aircraft maintenance engineers higher wages to be able to retain them. Next, providing easier access in the short term for international employees through the LMIA programs, either on a fast track or the exempt suitable candidates entirely, would allow us to hire pilots or aircraft maintenance engineers who are available internationally to fill the gap. Reducing turnaround times at Transport Canada for conversions.
If you could do your closing comments, please.
Sure. In closing, it's pretty quick and straight to the point. We need these challenges to be addressed to ensure that we can not only stay in business today, but to expand to meet the growing need that's coming up through the market.
Okay. Thank you very much. Captain Hoff, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you. My name is Michael Hoff. I am an airline pilot, and I love my job. I'm a Boeing 787 captain at Air Canada, based in Vancouver. I'm here representing the Air Canada Pilots Association. Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to thank all of you for taking on this issue. Stable and predictable access to aviation is important in a country as large as ours. Many sectors are struggling with labor supply issues. For pilots, the issue is complex. In our submission to the committee, you will see that the cost of pilot training and limited access to training flight time are factors. Not only that, so are the poor safety records and working conditions for entry-level pilots, factors that are borne out in research we have done to show that young Canadians are more likely to be interested in a career as a nurse, a firefighter, or even a video gamer than as a pilot. The easiest way for me to explain this is to tell my story through personal experience. Not only am I a pilot, but my 26-year-old son now flies for the regional airline Jazz. Let me explain. Pilot training can run upwards of $90,000, a tremendous cost burden for families and a difficult case to make if you need to secure a loan. For my son to get the training and accumulate the hours he needed, I ended up buying a small airplane, a PA-22, and we hired our own instructor. And yes, if you're wondering, it is somewhat like learning to drive a car. It can be better if someone else tells your kid what to do. Flight schools across Canada are fragmented. Some are aligned with accredited colleges, others are not. Many are small family-run operations. The Canada Revenue Agency does not recognize tuition expenses for all of them. Personally, I can tell you it took 3 years of fighting before CRA recognized my son's flight school for tax purposes. Not only that, I wasn't able to deduct any of the flying time in my own aircraft. Now contrast this with how easy it was to claim my other son's university tuition. A lot of students think that when they get their pilot's license, they can walk into a job at WestJet or Air Canada. In reality, it's more like pro sports. Before you make it to the big leagues, you have to literally get thousands of hours on the farm team. In Canada, that often means flying up north. Let me speak frankly. Day-to-day regulatory oversight can be totally disconnected from the reality on the ground. Rules requiring self-monitoring, that means pilots are supposed to decide for themselves whether or not they are fit for duty, which can be a tough decision when you are new and out of your element. In some operations, if a pilot reports that they are unfit to fly due to fatigue, they will be asked if they need a blankie and a pacifier to facilitate their nap. That is the culture. But if you need the job to get a better job, it can create a tremendous amount of pressure on inexperienced pilots. And it's one of the reasons why when we look at accident rates in Canadian aviation, the majority of hull losses, in other words, the total loss of an aircraft, and far too often the souls on board, are in the far north. I can tell you honestly that as a parent, I did not get a good night's sleep while my son was flying up north. What can we do about this? The survey we commissioned showed very clearly parents and students today are more attracted to the stable, safe pathways and immediate benefits that more traditional careers might offer. We need to reduce and eliminate the barriers that students face. That means, 1, we need policies to help defray the costs of entry, including making loans and tax credits available for flight schools. 2, we need to find ways to make accumulating flight and simulator time easier. 3, we need to encourage accredited public institutions to build flight schools. And 4, we need to work on making aviation safer. That includes ensuring strong regulatory oversight where our new pilots are flying, especially in the north. Statistics show that we must do better. This protects not only our newest pilots, but also their passengers. I'm proud to be a pilot. Nothing makes me happier than encouraging young people to consider this as a career. We do have the best view in the world from our office, but there is work to be done. I'm grateful to the attention of this committee on these important issues, and would specifically like to thank Mr. Fuhr for bringing this forward.
Thank you very much, Captain Hoff. Ms. Farley, please.
Hi. In French, thank you. Bonjour.
Hello,
Je me présente.
my name is Caroline Farley, and I'm the owner of the pilot training school Aero Loisir, and I'm a master instructor. I'm in charge of maintenance and an authorized officer for Transport Canada. In 2011, I became an instructor and made it a career. I would like to single out for their contributions to this presentation Ms. Louise Gagnon, who is a first-class instructor at Cargair and has been for the past 25 years, and Mr. Remy Cusack, who's the founder of the ALM Flight School, a Class 1 instructor for the past quarter century, now retired. Both are testers at Transport Canada. The waiting times for admissions to flight schools is ridiculous, and the root cause is the dearth of instructors. The shortage of instructors, well, there's no relief on the horizon, and we need to urgently fix this problem, and that is our incapacity to meet the needs, the increasing needs of commercial pilot licenses. Now that instruction is no longer mandatory to accumulate flying hours, only pilots who are really interested become instructors. We need to emulate the recommendations of the present study to really heighten the profile of flight instructors. And the perception regarding instruction and teaching is currently one of the insurmountable barriers. Pilots who choose to become flight instructors as a career are few and far between. Among them, there are founders of schools, testers, master instructors. They are the ones that have unparalleled knowledge on teaching and aviation. And these are the main players over the past 30 years that, in fact, founded the schools. And they're now retiring. They're selling their schools and they're paving the way for the future generation, but they're leaving a huge void. Now, I took over at a school in 2013, and that is what has occurred. The founder left in 2018 and retired. Up to that point, there were 2 career instructors, and now I'm alone. I think that our enthusiasm to inspire and influence training pilots is something that would lead to a greater number of instructors. Teaching does not have a high profile and is not well compensated. This is a harsh reality. They are not well paid. And unfortunately, due to weather events, that means even less regular, reliable income, as well as for the regions where our flight schools are located. Now, during the summer periods and the holidays, last-minute cancellations due to weather or mechanical problems make it very difficult and costly to apply normal labour standards. Even though the instructors in our school are reasonably well paid and their fees are quite high, our operational costs force us to impose caps on salaries. Maintenance costs aircraft parts continue to go up, and we have to absorb this increase. We're trying to level out the cost at acceptable levels to make aviation accessible. These fluctuating costs continue to go up, but the cost of fuel is also a problem. That begs the question, who is going to train the instructors of tomorrow? Only the highest qualified pilots can, in fact, train under certain aviation standards our most qualified pilots, and that's standard 421.723. It is possible to become an instructor only after 1 or 2 seasons, and airlines are going to get the experienced teachers and then those others fall by the wayside. So we're seeing a lessening of the quality of training, and unfortunately there are fewer and fewer mentors with enough knowledge of the practically so and operationally so. The operating of pilot schools in Canada has now become problematic. There's a reduction in the level of experience which will affect the quality of instruction. Now, currently, Transport Canada is mobilising Class 1 instructors to help with this problem. This is highly appreciated and shows that the department is serious about taking action. My personal fear is that I might be one of the only instructors with over 10 years of instructing experience. I am one of the only women who owns a pilot school in Canada.
Comments, please.
Yes, okay.
In closing, one of my other concerns is flight examiners and flight instructors. We need to look at that issue because currently there's a requirement that these instructors and testers be airline pilots, and this means that we are falling behind and there's a shortage of a labour shortage in that area.
From our members, Ms. Block, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I want to welcome our guests here this morning, as well as echo your, your appreciation to Mr. Fuhr for bringing this motion forward to the House. I believe it was unanimously supported, and so we recognize the very important role that flight schools have in our airline industry. I do want to go back to the testimony of Captain Hoff. If you would mind just recapping for me, I think you outlined 3 policies that you believed the government should undertake in order to address some of the issues for young pilots who are seeking to get more experience and perhaps make it easier for that to happen.
Right. I highlighted 4 points.
Okay.
The first was improve working conditions for new pilots in Canada's north, encourage accredited public institutions to build flight schools, make it easier for students to accumulate flight and simulator time, and examine options for reducing costs for students, like making it easier to get tax deductions for your education.
Mm-hmm. So all of these would touch upon the things that you have heard, not only perhaps from your son and his experience, but other young pilots, that some of these actually are real barriers to young people pursuing a career in this industry.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I would like to follow up on the testimony of Ms. Farley. I appreciate what you were saying at the end of your testimony in terms of being one of the only, or the only female that is who owns a flight school.
I think I'm one of the only. I'm not sure if there is one, so I don't want to proclaim myself to be the only one.
Okay.
But I do not know another.
Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to add? I know time is short, but you were starting out on that train of thought. Was there anything you wanted to add in regards to that?
Well, in regards to that, it's I think I was completing that issue, but it's all a whole. Can I speak in French? I'm sorry. Okay. je pense que c'est...
I think I'd prefer to speak in French, if I may. So I think to some extent, given that there's no succession plan and there's a dearth of instructors, I'm one of the only Class 1 instructors with as many years of experience, and even I myself need some sort of support and a community of Class 1 instructors to back me up. There is no more backup. We need a process that will help us to keep our instructors, to retain them, and to ensure that there's a high enough profile given to instruction. Currently, there's not a high profile because everyone knows that it's poorly paid. Rather than talking about how rewarding such a career would be and to oversee so many students with different personalities and skills, the only message that cuts through is that it's underpaid and we really need to tackle that problem.
Main point.
Thank you for that. You also talked about the costs of, operating a flight school. And I'm wondering, if there's the other side of the balance sheet would be revenue. Where do you get your revenue from?
Well, for any school or any, I think, aviation service, the revenue comes when the plane takes off.
Okay.
And when we give class instructions. So we have theoretical classes that we give, so there's a revenue that comes there. But then we've got the office, we have the internet, and so I won't go into that business side. But basically, if we don't give theoretical classes and we don't have planes flying, there's no revenue. And that's also why instructors, for example, starting in November till, we can say today, we've all seen the weather. And when you're in aviation, we don't look at the weather the same way. So I don't know if you all have seen how much the weather has not been so much flyable. Sorry for my English here. So that's lesser revenue. So how can we, with travailleurs autonomes, how can we really ensure a stable work payment when we can't guarantee such a high revenue? And I have a nice team of instructors right now because we were two career-motivated instructors. I have a really strong and nice team right now. But one is going to leave me in 1 year because he wants to stay, but he's going to be wrapped up by a company. But he promised me 1 year, maybe 2 years, because he wants to stay in the region. He doesn't want to be an airliner so much. He wants to, but not too much. He'd prefer staying at home. But salary compared to salary, you cannot compare. And I chose to be an instructor because I love it, but also because I have a son at home and I wanted to make sure that I came home at night. So there's different incentives that we can give instructors, but right now the salary is not one of them, unfortunately.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have any time left? Okay.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Fuhr.
Thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate that. I wanted to give, Mark, you kind of ran out of time too, so I wanted to give you an opportunity just to finish if you had a couple other things you wanted to say, and then I have a question.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Fuhr. The thing that was left out for me was the medical requirements that we have to face when we want to have pilots or instructors. I used a small example of people with color blindness that can wear corrective lenses that could actually, fix that. No different than, us when we have to wear regular lenses to repair that. But they're still not allowed to fly at night. They're still the people with color blindness, and they're still, restricted to having to have a radio in a control zone. And the other thing is, with regards to medicals, we have this abundance of people retiring at the top end of the airline community right now. But of course, once they reach certain age, it's harder to maintain your medicals. If they were at the airlines, they could continue to teach in a simulator, whereas we can't use them for any of the specific licensing requirements in our simulators in flight schools. And who best to train these people for where they're going to go than the people that are retiring, and we can't use them. We have to add that on as additional training, and that comes at a cost to the students in addition to what they're already paying.
Thank you for that. It's been pretty clear that we need more students. We need to remove the barriers to getting them into flight training, and obviously there's a financial piece. It's probably the biggest speed bump on that note. We need to train them faster, and we need more instructors. On the training them faster bit, I was wondering if any of the three of you would comment on how you might think competency-based training might shorten that training cycle so we can get people through the pipeline faster. Maybe I'll start with Caroline, if you had an opinion on that.
I need you to clear your. Sorry.
Okay, so training people to being competent in something versus just saying, hey, listen, for this phase of flying, you need so many hours. That might not be suitable for ab initio pilot training, but certainly to a commercial standard or an airline transport rating standard. Once we get further up the training cycle, some places will do training to competency, regardless of hours.
Gotcha.
And the Canadian system is just basically you need to achieve these hours and competency. Do you think that if we looked at how we train people, that might help us get people through faster once we got them in the door?
Thank you.
In French, we have full translation available.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Je pense que
I think that it's a really interesting question you've asked. I think to some extent, and this is my point of view, this is an approach that's already being used. For example, the 45 mandatory hours to be a private pilot. The most talented pilots at 35 hours are, in only rare cases, ready. At about 45 hours, given that exercises have improved, it becomes possible at that point. And the reason that you can't then move on to other flight exercises without having mastered the first component, well...
answering this question, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'll maybe move on to Mike. Do
Yes,
you have an
thank you.
opinion on that?
Yeah. I think that is a piece of it. Some of it is outdated and antiquated, but I think in the process you have to be careful that because of a perceived problem here, you don't start lowering the bar to meet what you have. So you have to keep the standard, but there are avenues. My son's in the right seat of a Dash 8 Q400, and he's out flying around in circles in my airplane at night because he needs to take a Transport Canada box. I really don't think it's going to make him a better pilot, but the box needs to be ticked.
Right. So I would agree with you. The standard has to be maintained throughout the entire process. And it certainly wouldn't be applicable to every phase of flight training, in my personal opinion and based on my experience. But I think it might shorten the process in areas where it made sense. Mark, did you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I agree with what Mr. Hoff has said here. You have to make sure the bar has been maintained. We use a combination where we train of competency-based, scenario-based training, but you still have to meet the standards. We have students that we will do testing on at 3/4 of their training that would be more than adequate to fly commercially, but we have to fill in another 40 or 50 hours with them. So those are the ones where we do advanced things with, which is fine. But again, that would be a method of reducing costs as well, potentially for those. On the flip side of that, you're probably going to see students where you're going to have to go beyond where the current limits are too. So I guess it's finding the balance. And I think with input from the airlines, I know we have a large program advisory committee. And I think if they're provided access in schools like we provide access, where we basically open the books and show them, how everybody's performing, I think that can help maintain those standards.
Great. Thank you very much. I believe that's my time.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much, Monsieur Aubin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Si je peux me permettre un commentaire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can just make a remark before my question. The interpreters pointed out they hadn't received the texts before we even got started, which made their task even more difficult. So I would request that for the next meeting, that interpreters do get the text before the meeting starts. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your testimony. It was most enlightening. And before... this situation is complicated, and we have a dearth of pilot trainers, and regardless of whether they're pilot instructors or not. Now, as far as the Canadian industry is concerned, this is a globalized market, and since there's a shortage of pilot, then by extrapolation, it's all these pilots are competing and they're trying to get the best a contract with the best company and best conditions. There was a study recently conducted regarding pilots' flight time. So my first question is for you, Captain Hoff. First, is the number of mandatory hours that a Canadian pilot can do, does that disadvantage to the Canadian market and in fact force them to go abroad to look for better conditions? And with the new regulations that introduced by the Minister and Transport Canada, are they satisfactory in your mind?
Sorry, the volume went down there, but I think you were asking if the hours were adequate and if Canada was out of line globally with was that annual flight times or flight times for licensing?
Ma question, c'est de savoir si
I want to know if the number of hours has something to do. I would like to know if the number of hours that a Canadian pilot has to accumulate vis-a-vis a foreign pilot has a bearing on our ability to retain pilots here at home in Canada.
I think our pilot qualification times are in line with other ICAO countries. We are actually advantaged over the U.S. system, where as a result...
Si je peux me permettre, je parle pas des...
If I may, I'm not talking about training hours, but flying hours, flight hours.
Or sound.
Yeah, no, I think we're fairly well aligned with other ICAO jurisdictions. I don't see any disparity there that would tip it one way or the other.
Ma deuxième question.
My second question, in your preliminary remarks, you referred briefly to problems that dragged on for 3 years with the Canada Revenue Agency. And it strikes me that this is within our purview and that's our bailiwick. Could you please elaborate on the problems that you came across so that we can take steps to facilitate the retention of pilot students?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked me that question. Actually, Mark and I went to college together, a college that no longer exists anymore, unfortunately. And one of the big problems I ran into was inconsistency in pilot training across the country. Ontario and Quebec have much more fulsome, vertically integrated training programs, and West, it's really become the wild, wild west. It's some colleges affiliated with a flight school, but they have no idea what happens over at the airport. We'll put together a basket of some economics classes and call it a business aviation diploma. But you go over to an airport and they're not our instructors. We don't really know what's going on with the curriculum, and something magic happens over there. So there are really good examples of how to do it properly. It's just there's no continuity, and it was quite interesting to see the juxtaposition from my younger son, who's an engineer, and the resources afforded to him to pursue his dream there versus the resources afforded to my older son as a pilot.
Merci. Ma prochaine question est pour Madame.
Thank you. My next question is for Ms. Farley. A lot is said about the cost that a student must bear to get training, and this is a complicated question or issue because this is a provincial area of jurisdiction, so we can't go it alone. But when you said that you bought a company that you were previously already an employee of, as a federal government, can we put in place measures that would allow for such things to happen in the future so that pilot training schools don't close and that there's someone to take over those schools? Well, that's an excellent question. The fact is that I was able to get funding from a program for young entrepreneurs under 35 years of age. So various government organisations pitched in financially with my purchase of the school. Now, schools are being bought currently schools are being bought by people who are passionate about aviation, who aren't necessarily flight instructors per se. As far as Quebec is concerned, well, I don't know of any schools that have gone bankrupt or closing their doors. I don't have statistics on all of Canada.
On to Mr. Graham for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Madame Farley, je vais commencer avec toi. Tu as commencé à parler de la manque d'examinateurs dans ta conclusion.
You spoke about a dearth of examiners in your remarks. Could you elaborate on that? And what is the time frame now? When I started my license, well, I had to wait a couple of days to sit for the exam. How long does it take to register for exam nowadays? Thank you very much for that question. Well, the fact of the matter is that nowadays, flight examiners for private and commercial pilots, well, it takes about a week. So when our student is ready, we can call up and they can be registered quite quickly. And sometimes these flight exams have to be cancelled because of the weather, and it's often rescheduled to the weekend or the next week. Now, for instructor exams, we have to register the candidates 2 months ahead of time, and there's no set time, in fact, because unfortunately all the instructors are commercial airline pilots as well, so they're not always free. Now, unfortunately, most of these instructors are full-time pilots. Usually the training takes 3 months, and this instructor training, well, when they start the instructor training, it's difficult to determine what date they will take the exam down the track. So in addition to waiting till they're ready, then there's a 2-month delay. And I know a number of examiners that would like to become official Transport Canada examiners who are denied this opportunity because they're not airline pilots. Well, with the current knowledge that trainees have, are they able to pass the exam successfully? Well, as far as theory exams go, a lot of them are out of date. And there's a lot of instructors out in the field who are concerned about the questions that are asked in exams and the topics. There's no transparency, and I'm a designated officer for Transport Canada and also a scrutineer of exams. I got clearance from the RCMP. I'm criminally liable were anything to go awry. But I would like Transport Canada to invite me to take part in a panel to review the content and format of the exams, because many of us are concerned about updating and modernising these exams. This is why some students are discouraged, both commercially and privately and publicly, and unfortunately they don't reflect the current trends. You said at the start of your presentation that the dearth of pilots is because, leads to a drop in the number of pilots that want to become instructors. Well, I do know a lot of pilots who would have liked to have been instructors. The pilots that become instructors back home do so because they want to, and most of them are retirees. And the fact of the matter is, most instructors are retirees. There's one instructor who does it as a part-time job because he wants to be at home with his wife in the evenings. There's another young pilot that I know who wants to stay in the region and work with his father, so he won't be a full-time instructor either. So we're talking about people who are really passionate about becoming instructors and can do 2 jobs. And this creates problems for our students. They don't always have consistency when it comes to instructors. Now, when a pilot, in fact, starts to fly for a commercial airline, is there some way we can encourage them to remain instructors even part-time? Well, I don't know how to answer that question aside from better motivating them. They have to have a sense of belonging to a school so that they're encouraged to come back. unfortunately, there's no financial motivation because the schools just quite simply can't pay them adequately. And so that's all I can say about that in terms of motivation. You responded to Mr. Aubin's question, and you said that you got funding to purchase your company through grants. Can you elaborate on what programs helped you to purchase your pilot school? Well, I got a scholarship, a bursary for young entrepreneurs, and this program the model could be emulated for instructors. I've got a mental block here. I can't think of the name of the program exactly, but it's a kind of a wage for entrepreneurs, so that in the first year of owning a company, they can draw a wage, and that allows for enough money for operating costs. And that makes it sustainable when it's a startup or when you're just getting started with a company.
On to Mr. Rogers, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for appearing today. I want to address my question to Caroline first, and that is, according to the Labour Market Report of March 2018, only 30% of the people involved in the aviation industry are female, and only 7% are women. What do you believe is the cause of this significant underrepresentation of women among Canadian pilots? Is it because of how we have created a gender divide, or is it the way we've targeted certain people? Because I know back in the days when doctors were men, nurses were women. Gender parity, of course, and gender equality and all the other things we talk about, but is that a problem that the females in our society and underrepresented groups like minority groups have not applied for pilot schools to become pilots? Is that one of the biggest causes for why we see the shortage we see today?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I think we all have this image that sorry to say this way, but Mr. Captain Hoff represents the image of the pilot that we all have. We do not see a lot of female pilots, and the fact that we need to hear a voice of a woman telling us that we're ready to land in Peterborough, or that we're ready to land. Our parents never tell us as young women that it is a possibility to be an airliner. We're not giving that possibility. It's when we're older that we see someone that we're giving the opportunity to think outside the box. And at my school, I think I do play a certain influence, because I do influence the daughters of my pilots. I do influence my pilots that say, hey, I have a daughter. I think she should come and meet you. So at my school, we're way more than 7%. But I think that there's this new generation, and there's a lot of initiatives of women in aviation that are going out. We have the 99ers. We have a lot of women's association that are existing. And I think soon enough we'll be increasing those percentages. And if I can permit to say one other thing, one question that is asked, because I'm asked to talk to a lot of ladies, although it is conceived as a male environment, how do I say this? Women are so included in aviation. I have never felt discriminated against. I have never felt that I was a woman in a man's group. This is a sisterhood, a brotherhood, and there is always room for women and everyone in aviation. Because one thing that we learn in aviation is you cannot be a pilot if you're not a team worker, a team player.
I thank you for that, and I've done a lot of flying in my lifetime, and I think it was last year that the first time I ever saw on a flight where we had a pilot and a co-pilot that were female. And that was the first time that I've ever seen that. The other comment I wanted to make was that to Captain Mike, teaching is a noble career. I was a teacher for 29 years. Loved interacting with high school kids on a daily basis, most days anyway. And, you know, it was imparting knowledge and guiding these young people and becoming, you know, chasing different careers and stuff. So your pilot association, is there that kind of wanting to be mentors, to be to young people, young pilots, and is that sort of an inspiration for you as a part of your career?
Absolutely. I would love to be able to participate in that. I feel very strongly about it. My career has been fantastic because of altruistic people ahead of me. Mark and I were extremely fortunate to go through a school that had a lot of retired airline people and retired military people, and we got a fantastic education as a result. But it's been difficult to give back vis-a-vis instructing because we have time limits and we're expensive to our companies. And if I go and teach somewhere else, that takes away from the time my employer can use me, and that's a no-go area for them.
Mr. Rogers, on to Ms. Leach.
Well, thank you all for being here today. My questions will be for all of you, so please feel free to step forward. One of the things that I think all of you have mentioned is the high capital cost, obviously, of running flight schools. Has there been any opportunity for you to speak to an increase in the Airport Capital Assistance Program, or, quite frankly, in a change in the capital cost allowance on your taxes for your organizations? You know, we talk about that frequently for other industries, but have you been able to approach the government with respect to that in your flight schools and your overhead costs?
If I can answer a little bit of that, the way the programs are set up, where we are for the aircraft capital part of it, the airport doesn't qualify because it's too busy, right? You know, it's one of these things. There's nothing that is out there that assists specifically for this. Even if it did qualify, it wouldn't qualify under the equipment and rules.
Well,
like
I guess
that.
what I'm saying is I think that there may be an opportunity there for you, and I would encourage you to be advocates on that. Whether it be for your flight simulation equipment, which is a high capital cost. I'm a surgeon. We use simulators all the time. You guys are sort of like the anesthetists in my world. You do the takeoff and landing. I'm the person in between as a surgeon. But we use simulations all the time, and they're high capital cost equipment. Maybe a second question with respect to the actual education of young pilots. Obviously, for undergraduate, postgraduate education in this country, we provide the Canada Student Loan Program and a forgiveness program. Have any of you, or a large industry leader like Air Canada and others, advocated that, similar to skilled trades, that your young pilots and trainees should be a component part of that program? I leave it with you. En français, donc je t'en prie.
Well, as far as loans for students are concerned, if you're not a school that is twinned with a college program, we're not eligible, and our students aren't eligible. There are private schools that have no links with the government college system that are recognised by Transport Canada. But the government needs to make sure that more and more are eligible. And currently we have loan agreements with specific banks for the training of professionals in our regions. And that's a plus. But when it comes to tax deductions...
You know that pour les déductions d'impôts, on émet des...
As far as tax deductions are concerned, we of course submit receipts for tuition. And I know recently my students have said that when they file their tax returns, that their deductions were in fact reduced by the Canada Revenue Agency with regards to their tuition. And I'm not a specialist in taxation, but I think it would behoove you to look more closely at that, because a lot of students have said that the CRA has revised down their deductibles.
One of the other issues that came up, and I guess it is a bit tangential to what Ms. Farley was just mentioning, is with regards to the regulations for these simulation schools and who should be eligible to be running them. That may also aid in providing an opportunity for the, whether it be the federal government or provincial governments, to say that all students should be eligible. If there's one set of regulations that govern one being able to function these facilities and one standard, then obviously each organization should be eligible for financial support for their students. And Mr. Hoff, you look like you.
Yeah,
have an
sorry,
answer to that.
I'd like to jump in there. First of all, I'd like to thank both of my colleagues for the work that they do at these schools. These schools have done a great job of stepping forward and filling a need
Absolutely.
that wasn't there because it had been abandoned. But some of the upsides to the type of school that Mark and I attended is the college bought the simulator, and to take nothing away from businesses that need to make a profit, they have to pay for that simulator. They need to charge for the time on it. When Mark and I went to school, our college was very highly regarded for its grads for their instrument skills, because we had 24-hour a day, 7-day a week access to those simulators for free. And we would get in there and fly them. And a private institution can't do that.
Well, I would beg to differ if a private institution can do it or not. Whether they choose to do it or not, I think, is what the issue is. And I think it's incumbent upon industry to actually try to escalate that bar. If we're going to have excellence, then we should be training people to be excellent. But that being said, with respect to regulations, my question would be is for Ms. Farley, and I apologize, I'll call you Mark. Would these regulations be more of a burden to you as a company, or would you see them as something that would augment your ability to be able to receive additional funding and support for your students and for your own company?
I guess I'm trying to understand what regulations you're actually talking about as a potential. Are you talking about regulations that would be
Educational standards.
Educational standards?
You're running a flight school. It's a school.
It depends on how they're rolled out, I guess, and what they actually are. Right now we have educational standards per se through Transport Canada already. So if it's just doubling it up, like we have some with the Ministry of Education in BC, where they try to manage us as well and things like that, and it becomes cumbersome and it doesn't really benefit the students. And no, if it benefits the students and can be managed, that's fine. Right. Just bearing in mind that costs do have to come out of the students' pockets unless there's other funding avenues set up as well.
Okay, thank you very much. On to Mr. Iacono.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Badaway?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question to Mr. Hoff with respect to the industry, as well as the partnership that the industry may have with the Air Canada Pilots Association, in particular Air Canada themselves. In my former life, we really encouraged industry in partnership with union, in partnership with communities, etc., secondary, post-secondary schools, to really get students at a younger age interested in different trades, different disciplines, and with that partnered to then start the process of co-op, apprenticeship, education, etc., and then leading into post-secondary, they would pursue those disciplines to then further their education and ultimately end up in the area of expertise they want to be in. Is there any of that partnership between the association and, in your case, Air Canada, with respect to, one, getting the younger secondary individuals interested, and then, of course, from there, them then to pursue it through secondary, post-secondary? You got the Air Cadet programs. You have other interested organizations that would actually align with being a pilot. Is there any partnership occurring with respect to between you and Air Canada?
Okay. First of all, I'll speak to the piece with my employer. I've approached my employer. They are the apex predator. Their position is they don't have a problem getting pilots, and I've found very little traction with them. Personally, they do give me access to the simulator, as well as taking would-be pilots that are looking at it as a career up in my own airplane. I also take them into the simulator. And so I thank Air Canada for the opportunity to use their simulators, but that's about where it ends. on the altruistic side where I feel the need to give back. I've got excellent traction through my association. People would ask, well, why would your association use your membership's dues to hire advocates and do these studies and collect the data, because the data wasn't there. And I'm a pilot. I need data. I can't come and talk to you and say, well, I've heard. So we did a study and did a drill down and got some data, and we're trying to help.
Okay, well, you seem very cautious in your comments, and I'd like to have a little chat with you offline after the meeting about some of the
I'd appreciate
comments
that.
that I'm sure that you're being very cautious with. So
Thank you.
with that, I'll pass on to Mr. Iacono.
Merci. Bon matin. Merci d'être venu.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for coming. Ms. Farley, congratulations on having the guts to purchase a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy. Well, not on the verge of bankruptcy, but I mean about to close up shop and close its doors. So you saved it from bankruptcy, should I say. No, well, I saved it from closing down altogether. Could you please describe the obstacles that you had to overcome, you continue to have to overcome, and what are the economic impacts on aviation schools in the regions? Well, the difficulties that I faced in terms of getting the company back up on its feet, yes. Well, that's a big topic that you've just opened up. Well, the biggest challenge in getting the pilot training school up on its feet was to find qualified instructors. And not instructors that just want to put in a couple of hours, but someone who wants to provide instruction that is in line with the reputation of our school, and someone who's going to stick around for a while as well. That's the biggest challenge we face, retaining our instructors. We also have trouble managing demand. There are very few places where there are pilot schools, and there are 5 locations where I've been asked to set up a pilot training school. So ensuring that the pilot school is stable is tough. I want to ensure that the reputation that was established by its founder is maintained, and there's huge needs in this area. And currently, we're training a lot of commercial pilots because there's an increasing demand for them, but not for bimotor aircraft, given the exorbitant costs of bimotor aircraft. And unfortunately, the training costs are very, very high. I'm referring to twin-engine aircraft, rather. So if I had more money, I'd buy another twin-engine aircraft, but I can't raise tuition because the tuition needs to remain accessible. I'm trying to pay my instructors more. I'm trying to train them more, buy more aircraft, buy a twin engine. But many of my students can't enroll in a twin engine training program because it's too expensive. And so it's not easy to strike a balance when it comes to operational costs and also ensuring that aviation remains accessible.
Witnesses, I'm sorry our time has expired. We will suspend momentarily while we exchange our witnesses. Thank you so very much for coming today. Welcome to our witnesses for this portion of the program. We have by video conference Ms. Bell, Board Chair of the British Columbia Aviation Council. Welcome, Ms. Bell. And from CAE, we have Joseph Armstrong, Vice President and General Manager. And from Super T Aviation, Terry Super, Chief Executive Officer. And from Go Green Aviation, Gary Ogden, Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to all of you. I would ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes because the committee members always have lots of questions. So could we start with Ms. Bell from the British Columbia Aviation Council?
Thank you, and good afternoon. I would like to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak today and for the efforts being taken to address this critical issue. I speak today as the chair of the British Columbia Aviation Council, representing the interests of the aviation community in BC. Personally, my 36-year career has been in air traffic control. I've worked as an operational tower controller and a radar controller. And when I retired from NAV Canada, I was the general manager of the Vancouver Flight Information Region, responsible for all air navigation services in the province, as well as the over 500 employees who delivered that service. I am aware that the committee has had the opportunity to hear from many respected industry professionals, and as such, I am confident in your awareness of the critical resource shortages being experienced and projected for our industry. These shortages will span the depth and breadth of our industry and will include, but not be limited to, airport operators, air traffic controllers, aircraft maintenance engineers, and pilots. As the motion before the committee is specific to pilots, I will focus my comments on the pilot shortage and the difficulties at the flight training level, but I feel it is important to note that the pilot shortage, while critical, is not singular. And just as this issue is not specific to the pilot group, the fix for it is not simple or singular either. I know that several recommendations have been put forth to the committee, and I would like to add the support of BCAC for the following 4. 1, increased and consistent access to student loans for flight training. Currently, the access to student loans for flight training is not consistent from province to province. Unlike some other provinces, loan funding in BC is based on the length of training rather than the cost of training. As has been presented to the committee, the cost of flight training to the level of a commercial multi-IFR rated pilot will exceed $75,000, certainly more than the cost of tuition and books for most 4-year university bachelor degrees. Therefore, the creation of a federally backed national student loan program that makes available a level of funding commensurate with the cost of flight training would be the single most impactful step that could be taken. 2, initiatives to increase recruitment and retention of flight instructors. Prior to the resource shortage, flight schools and Northern Air operators could count on new pilots gaining much needed flight hours and experience by obtaining instructor ratings and working as flight instructors or taking positions with operators servicing northern and remote communities. Now we see our flight training units and Northern Air operators struggling to recruit and retain employees. So along with the development of a national student loan program, we recommend a matrix of loan forgiveness based on time spent as a flight instructor or time spent flying designated remote routes. For reference, we see similar programs in place for medical personnel working in remote communities. 3, support training innovation. The regulatory requirements around aviation can be an impediment to innovation and training. We need to rethink how and who is doing our training. Aviation is an extremely complex environment, so it's interesting to me that flight training is one of, if not perhaps the only system I can think of, where for the most part, we send our least experienced aviators to train our new aviators. We don't send first-year medical students to train new doctors, and we don't send high school students to train the next generation of teachers. Yet in the beginning of the career, that is what we do with pilots. I'm not saying it's not safe, and I'm not saying we don't produce a good product, because it is and we do. But is it the best way? ATAC, the Air Transportation Association of Canada, has recommended the approved training organization model, which could change, streamline, and improve training, all while meeting regulatory requirements. BCAC strongly supports this initiative. 4, support for initiatives to remove barriers to entry for women and Indigenous peoples. Women and Indigenous people continue to be underrepresented in this industry. With women making up 50% of our population and Indigenous youth, the fastest growing demographic in Canada, a focus on these groups could prove advantageous on many levels. We strongly encourage continued support for established outreach programs to women, such as Elevate Aviation. But for energizing the Indigenous sector, I believe there needs to be a concerted effort to take culturally relevant programs of introduction and education out to Indigenous communities. I'm the co-founder of a program we have called Give Them Wings, where we'll be introducing careers in aviation to Indigenous youth with a focus on pilots. Our first event will be held in March at Boundary Bay Airport, where we will connect with the Musqueam, Tsawwassen, and Tsleil-Waututh communities. With support, we hope to take this initiative across the province and beyond. Today, air transport has become a taken-as-granted mode of transportation in the developed world. The social and economic impacts stemming from a pilot shortage have the potential to be, at best, annoying. If your vacation is ruined because your flight from Vancouver to Penticton or vice versa was canceled because of a lack of pilots, and you miss your connection to Rome and subsequently your cruise, that would be annoying. But at
Do
worst,
your
it could be
closing
devastating.
lines, Ms. Bell.
At worst, it could be devastating when there is no pilot to transport your critically ill child and the unimaginable happens. Again, I thank the committee and I look forward to any questions you may have and to any assistance I or my organization can lend.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Armstrong from CAE.
Sure. Hello, bonjour, Madam Chair and committee members. It's an honor to be here today on behalf of CAE to provide our perspectives on pilot training in Canada and abroad. And a bit of a history lesson. In 1939, Canada, in conjunction with its allies, established the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, or BCATP. Located in communities across Canada, BCATP trained more than 130,000 crewmen and women over a 6-year period, which is considered today one of Canada's great contributions to Allied victory. And today our nation's history in pilot training and our strong aerospace sector remain some of our greatest national assets, and successive governments have identified flight training as a key industrial capability. Building from the BCATP heritage, CAE was founded in 1947 by Mr. Ken Patrick, an ex-Royal Canadian Air Force officer, who had a goal to create something Canadian and take advantage of a war-trained team that was extremely innovative and very technology-intensive. And fast forward to today, we're now the world leader in training for civil, defense, and healthcare professionals. With over 65 training locations, we have the largest civil aviation training network in the world. Each year, we train more than 220,000 civil and defense crew members, including more than 135,000 pilots. Most people don't realize it, but wherever you're traveling, chances are that the pilots were either trained at CAE in a simulator we built right here in Canada or in a training center located somewhere in the world. Although the number of pilots we train annually is impressive, it is far from being sufficient to meet the current and future needs. In 2018, we released a pilot demand outlook, and according to our analysis, by 2028, the active combined airline and business jet pilot population will exceed 500,000 pilots. 300,000 of those pilots will be new. Many military pilots are choosing a career in the commercial sector, with some of the driving factors being quality of life, better pay, and opportunities. Military pilot attrition is also having a significant impact on professional air forces, reducing their ability to maintain a cadre of pilots to meet operational requirements, as well as their ability to produce qualified flight instructors to support their training pipelines. And we see this impact today on the military training programs we deliver right here in Canada. In this context, maximizing the available pool of potential talent is more important than ever. Today, women make up only 5% of professional pilots and cadets worldwide. Tackling gender diversity would address that imbalance while giving the aviation community access to a talent pool nearly twice its current size. In a recent survey we conducted of aviation students and cadets in Canada and abroad, a number of issues were raised consistently, including the significant financial burden placed on students to enter into pilot training, as well as the lack of certainty in career outcomes when they make that investment. Women specifically raised concerns about being able to fit in a male-dominated world and have an appropriate work-life balance. The fact that they have very few role models, female role models, in aviation does not help in mitigating their concerns. Faced with such a shortage, our industry is looking for solutions to help develop more pilots faster. How? By building new types of partnerships between fleet operators and training providers to provide better links between flight schools and the airlines who will ultimately receive these students. New training systems that make better use of real-time data and analytics are facilitating a move towards competency-based training, and we are taking advantage of AI and big data analytics.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you slow it down
Sure.
a little bit? I realize you want the 5 minutes as
Yeah,
much
no
as
problem.
possible, but the translators have.
I'll slow down the fire hose. It's a lot of
All right,
information.
thank you.
So last summer, CAE announced, in partnership with the governments of Canada and the province of Quebec, a digital transformation project to develop the next generation of training solutions. We will be investing $1 billion over the next 5 years in innovation, which is one of the largest investments of its kind in the aviation training sector anywhere in the world. But beyond technology and improving training, the real challenge is attracting students and increasing diversity to broaden the civil aviation talent pool. As an example, through its recently launched CAE Women in Flight Scholarship Program, we will award up to 5 full scholarships to women who are passionate about becoming professional pilots and interested in becoming role models. Incentives are required to stimulate pilot production in both the civil and military markets and to offset the significant costs associated with student fees, investments in infrastructure, and the need to evolve technology to optimize training output. Focused investments targeting areas such as scholarships and bursaries should be put in place to support financing of pilot training in Canada for students and cadets. Infrastructure investments to support increased pilot training capacity. Committing to training and simulation as a key industrial capability. Focused investments in AI and competency-based training. We encourage Canada to increase funding and directly support pilot training as a unique part of our heritage that must be maintained, is a key economic driver for growth within Canada and abroad, and as a key focus for young Canadians to become part of the global aviation community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. On to Ms. Super from Super T Aviation.
It is with great pleasure that I present to this committee the concerns and challenges facing Canadian flight schools. As the chief pilot of Super T Aviation based in Medicine Hat, Alberta, I have over 13,000 hours in medevac, training, charter, and scheduled flying experience. While I have provided the committee with a briefing document outlining our recommendations, I would like to highlight 3 categories for the committee to consider: student support, instructor retention, and school support. Pursuing a career as a professional pilot costs between $75,000 and $85,000 in training alone, not including living expenses. Lack of funds or their unavailability are often the reasons for student dropout or students' inability to consider a career in aviation. Therefore, we are calling for increased government-backed financial aid and assistance for flight training. This would allow students to obtain financing through the government and/or a commercial pathway and eliminate a major barrier facing Canadians interested in becoming a pilot. amending the Canada Provincial Job Grant Program to allow flight schools to obtain funds for employee training without the need for the training to be done by third-party providers would remove another barrier facing pilots who want to improve flying qualifications. Most flight schools are the only training unit at an airport. To receive advanced training through this federal assistance program, these pilots would have to move to a new city and new airport to obtain training, which could last anywhere between 1 to 6 months. Retention of flight instructors. Retention of experienced flight instructors has become a major issue facing the flight school community. While flight schools would traditionally mentor an inexperienced flight instructor for 1.5 to 2 years before they moved on to bigger, faster aircraft with a charter or small airline operator, these days the progression can be as little as a matter of months. This puts a tremendous strain on flight schools who must constantly be training and hiring new students. This also adds a safety concern where inexperienced pilots are focused on moving on to their next job and end up flying more complex aircraft without sufficient experience. In order to rectify this situation, I recommend that the government offer loan forgiveness for instructors similar to what is offered to medicals working in the remote and rural areas. I also recommend legislation similar to the United States, where pilots are required to obtain a minimum of 1,500 hours flying experience before they are eligible to fly for the major airlines. Regulations such as this would not only aid flight schools, but also small charter and medevac operations. Help for flight schools. Flight schools are the background of the aviation industry, and we cannot keep up to the demand due to the high cost of training, which is partly due to government policy. It's a harsh reality that aircraft burn fossil fuels. The cost of fuel is one of the largest expenses for a flight school. This cost, of course, is passed on to the student as part of instructional fees. To help keep the cost of training down for the student, we recommend that the federal government, 1, exclude flight schools from the carbon tax, which has and or will increase the cost of training for the student dramatically. 2, reprise the federal excise tax for fuel on instructional aircraft. 3, support the development of alternate biofuels for aircraft or electric aircraft. And 4, financially support flight schools in their use of specialized equipment that is required for flight training, including flight training devices commonly known as simulators. These devices increase competency and experience in a controlled environment, but come at a cost usually several times greater than the cost of a flight school's other capital assets. In conclusion, this committee has been presented with the statistics of the pilot shortage from various witnesses appearing before it. The numbers are real and the shortage is real. Flight schools are tasked with producing safe, dependable, and professional pilots in ever-increasing numbers in order to sustain and, in fact, expand the growing aviation industry. This can only be accomplished by government and the aviation industry working together to provide students, instructors, and flight schools the resources and help they need. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thank you very much. On to Go Green Aviation. Mr. Ogden, 5 minutes, please.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, and thank you to my fellow witness colleagues. My name is Gary Ogden, Gary Douglas Ogden, if my mom's watching. And I'd like to speak more to a higher level. My colleague, Mike Rocha, who is a member of an executive from our flight school, will be speaking to this committee on the 19th. I'd like to touch on some of the elements of our business and possible root cause analysis as to why we're in the situation we're in right now. My background literally lends itself to airports, airlines, and ground service providers in the aviation industry. I rode my bike to the airport in 1979, and I haven't been home since. I've started as a security guard, and I became a CEO. So the business and the industry holds much for us all, and it offers opportunity. I'm concerned in the fact that I have 5 major clients, and all 5 of my clients, one of them including Aura Airlink, which will be doing business as Central North Flying Club, all of my businesses are struggling to find people, they're struggling to keep people, and we face the enemy of attrition and turnover in aviation. I've worked overseas at airports in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan. I've worked in the States. I've worked pretty much everywhere. I choose to work in Canada because I'm proud of our aviation heritage, and my colleague points out that we have a vast history of training. We are world-renowned in the training we offer. Part of why I wanted to get involved with ORA and CNFC in a flying school in Canada is because we have that reputation, and we should be able to attract domestic students, and we should be very successful at attracting international students as well. We do this business for two reasons. One, a holistic reason, and it does still exist, and I listened to my colleagues here earlier speak about it. There are holistic reasons for doing this. We see a shortage. We want to fill a shortage. We want to accommodate the stated ICAO and IATA and ATAC and all of the industry pundits who say there is growth in our business. We want to accommodate that. We want to facilitate regional access. We don't want to lose regional access by having no air service. And we want to serve our remote communities and our Indigenous people to the level that they deserve to be served. We want to build bridges. We want to build, and we want to fly over obstacles. We want to do that holistically. But then the economic reality sets in. The math doesn't work. Airlines, the industry itself, is burdened with a number of challenges. The price of a ticket today is probably as much or maybe less than it was in 1980, yet our costs are a lot higher. Central North Flying Club plans to start up in Sudbury. A regional airport has to struggle to get the attention of government, and I salute Mr. Furr and the efforts of the current sitting government and of the previous governments when we work towards alleviating some of this problem. The problem with GA, general aviation at airports, regional airports, they don't generate revenue. They generally don't pay for themselves. At best, revenue neutral. We don't have duty free. We don't have parking. We don't have non-aeronautical revenues to support that airport. So under ACAP, and my colleague, I believe she's gone for now, Kelly, she brought up the ACAP program. We need to do more for regional airports where flying schools are located to ensure that the flying school is not burdened with the infrastructure of that airport. We have to see the flight schools, the Medivac, the charters, the public flying and learning as critical, as having a benefit in the pipeline of our aviation industry. In hockey sense, think of it as your farm team. If you don't have a farm team, if you don't reproduce the future, we're doomed to successfully live it. So we must support the farm team. We must support flying schools. We must support regional aviation to the best of our abilities. We've got to, and I thank all of you. There are a number of initiatives with loans, with student work programs, with LMIAs, with a number of initiatives. What I would like to see, and I was talking to my friend MP Sicken about this, is maybe we have to get our information out there better. Maybe there are programs, maybe they're not consolidated, maybe they're not accessible, so somebody who struggles, and God bless our friend who started a flight school after it looked like it was closing. Maybe with access to information, and that's something we can do, perhaps even as low-hanging fruit, give people the access to information that they can use in order to access those funds that you have there, as well as let's grow the funding and let's grow the initiatives to further those funds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogden. We'll start with our members questioning. Mr. Folk for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses here at committee today. Your testimony has been very interesting. But Ms. Super, I'd like to ask you a few questions. I took my pilot's license about 20 years ago. I had my private pilot's license, just over 800 hours. And At the time, I thought the cost was expensive, and I was really frustrated I couldn't write it off as a furthering education expense. It wasn't tax deductible for me at all. I talked to our local flight school operator, Harv's Air, where I took my training. My instructor, by the way, was a woman, about 20 years my junior, and I had no problems with that, and she had no problems training me, and she did a great job. Her name is Dana Shapil, if I can give her a little shout out. I think she's an examiner today. And I just thought at the time cost is prohibitive, and talking to my flight school within the last couple of weeks, they said that retaining instructors is a huge challenge. And so my question is, you mentioned a few things, but what really do you think would be the number one thing or the number or two things that you could do to retain instructors? You talked about increasing the hours to 1,500 before they can fly commercially. That's probably not a bad idea because most of them are instructing just to log hours to get onto a carrier somewhere, right?
Yes, and that's true. Flight schools have traditionally been the bottom feeders. Okay, the instructors do not usually stay instructing. It would be great if we could get some of the airline captains to come back, and we're currently in talks with WestJet to see if with one of the carriers to see if we can work out something where they lend us one of their pilots for 1 or 2 days a month even would be a really good start. It's I don't think you're ever going to cure that problem. You can throw more money at the instructors, higher salaries. They're looking for the big iron. They're young, most of them are young people, and they want to fly larger aircraft. So you can only capture them for a small period of time. And that's where I think if there was some sort of a loan forgiveness, that may be an incentive because the loans are significant for these students. There may be a incentive for them to stay in the flight instructional area longer and get more experience before they go out to their other jobs.
I don't know what your experience is with the pilots or potential pilots that you're attracting, whether they're domestic or international. I know Harv's Air and Steinbeck attracts a lot of international students. Domestic ones, not quite so much. And I talk to young people all the time about getting into aviation and getting their pilot's license. And the number one reason they cite is not because they're not interested, not because it's not exciting, it's the cost. And one of the things that adds significantly to the cost, and I know it from operating an aircraft, my Mooney doesn't fly on fumes, and is the cost of fuel. You talked a little bit about the carbon tax, what it is, what it will be. Just this last week, the National Airlines Council of Canada released a statement saying that they had done 2 studies in 2018 showing the negative impacts that a carbon tax will have on the cost towards aviation, the cost of passenger travel, but also the cost for flight school operators without any significant or without really any measurable effect on reducing emissions. Could you comment on that a little bit?
Right. The carbon tax we have already in Alberta, and it is significant. It does increase the costs. And we need the infrastructure. We need airlines. We need everyone wants to fly. You guys all go home on the weekend flying in an airline. So we have to provide that. So the carbon tax idea of, well, that will help reduce people using fossil fuels is just not going to be true for a flight school. The more students we put out, the more fuel we're going to use. The one thing that I see that is a great potential is the use of simulation. We have an integrated course at our school. We have 2 simulators. They're flight training devices. They don't move, but they simulate flight very well. And but we can't use all of that training for their licensing.
And we heard from previous testimony that the cost of simulators is very expensive, and you need to recover that cost somehow as well.
Right.
And so perhaps there's some assistance programs you could have that would help you explore that avenue.
Some sort of government matching for these costs.
I'm out of time in 8 seconds, but if you could have the opportunity to talk a little bit about infrastructure needs either at municipal airports or private airports, I'd appreciate that.
Very briefly, please.
Oh, I'm afraid I'm not really qualified to talk about the infrastructure at airports.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah. Thank you.
That'll be brief.
Mr. Graham.
Thank you. Ms. Super, when when the transition between the panels was taking place, you met Ms. Farley from my riding, and it was nice to learn about the other female airport owner. So I just wanted to make that point that you hadn't mentioned that particular bit in the opening. Were there other comments in the previous panel that you wanted to address? Because you'd indicated interest in doing so, being that in our early conversation, there's things that were animating you.
Yeah, now if I can think of them. I'm getting a little older, so it takes me a little longer to...
That's okay. Some flight planning is required. All right, so I'll go to Mr. Ogden for a second. You had mentioned the cost of the infrastructure burden on flying schools. Can you go more into the detail of what those costs are and what the actual numbers are? Can you measure that out for us?
I can't give you actuals because I'm sure it changes by airport.
Right.
But you have hangarage fees. You have the controlled environment at an airport that needs to be maintained from a safety and security perspective. We have flight instructors basically going out and de-icing airplanes, pushing them back with either by hand or by machine, and adding oils and doing maintenance work while they're supposed to be flight instructors because there's just not the money there. Again, that's a vicious circle, and it puts people off being flight instructors. So when those costs at airports, and I can speak to Sudbury a little bit better because we're going up there and we have taken a facility. The costs of hangering the airplanes, of then keeping them in a weather-protected environment when we have weather exactly like what we've just seen, are not cheap. De-icing at airports is not cheap, and for our business, we simply don't fly at big airports, so we don't have the benefit of central facilities, but we are forced to buy de-icing equipment. I believe there was even a study a couple of weeks ago released that said northern airports are somewhat lacking in their de-icing capability and coverage.
Well, a lot of flying schools are at grass strips and things like that too, where there's very little infrastructure to speak of.
And we have to wait till it thaws,
Right.
or we have to wait till it goes. I mean,
Right.
We contemplated using Brampton, but we needed more access to better facilities. Unfortunately, more expensive facilities at Sudbury. We also have a second airport just adjacent there that we can use to increase our flying hours.
I think I have a picture of that. Just out of curiosity, what is the Go Green reference?
Go Green is the company. I started many years ago with respect to cleaning and greening the airport environment. I personally am involved with a number of initiatives. One is to try to electrify more of the airport ramp. Again, cleaning and greening that ramp, making it safer for our staff out there. And that's the holding company that the consultancy goes out from. But I have joined with Aura to be a component of this flight school.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Zupa, I'll come back to you now. You talked about the cost of fuel a bit in your presentation. I was wondering, flight schools generally rent their aircraft wet. When you rent a plane, you rent it wet. Can you explain for those who don't fly what that means and if that approach is sustainable in the long term?
Well, the aircraft wet means that it has fuel in it. So if a student or a renter is going to take one of our aircraft, it comes with fuel. If they go away to another airport, we will reimburse them at our cost. We won't reimburse them if they purchase fuel at a higher price at a different airport. But generally, some schools don't do it that way. Some operators actually do because the price of aviation fuel floats week to week, as it does at the gas pumps. They will do it as they rent it to the person dry, and every flight is then they figure out the cost, how much fuel has been used, and apply the cost of the fuel onto the price of the flight.
Sounds like a lot of extra paperwork.
Pardon me?
Sounds like a lot of extra paperwork to keep track of how much fuel is used on each
Yes, and
flight.
that's why a lot of schools go with just wet.
That makes sense.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Graham. On to Mr. Aubin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci aux témoins.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for being here today. Very informative. Now, in an industry where there are complicated problems, let's start with you, please, Ms. Bell. You've put your finger on a problem that all witnesses have referred to, and that is the cost of training for students who do choose this as a career. Now, the problem as I see it is that the models or templates vary from one province to another. If I look at Quebec, that I'm more familiar with because that's where I live and come from, the possibility of a totally private school that meets Transport Canada's standards, or the possibility of a school that is part of the college school network is unlikely. Is there a model that we should be using in Quebec to better harmonise and as a result to reduce the cost of training?
Oh, thank you for that question. Yes, I believe that if there was a more consistent model across the country, we would see streamlined training, certainly from province to province. The issue that I spoke about was with respect to the availability of student funding and how that varies from province to province. With respect to how the training organizations operate province to province, I'm not an expert in that, but I do know that the Air Transportation Association of Canada has put forth a model with respect to approved training organizations that would make a more uniform training system. Right now, the Canadian aviation regulations regulate number of hours that required to be accomplished prior to any student pilot receiving any level of licensing. And I think that some of that needs to be re-examined, how the time is. I just seem to have lost something here, but can you still see me there? Okay. How the training is applied with respect to time, as other people have said later, would be a very valuable asset for a training organization. But right now, the regulations don't allow much simulator time to be applied to a license. So I think that, yes, if there was more uniform federal regulations, it would be very helpful.
Merci pour ces informations.
Thank you for that information. A quick question for Mr. Ogden. The name of your company, Go Green, is an inspiring one. We saw in on another study on noise near major airports, and that creates a friction between the community and its environs. Now, is it possible to train pilots on electric planes that would be at a comparable cost to a plane that would run on fuel?
Merci, Monsieur Robert. Sorry for the delay. It was just finishing the translation. And I'm a big believer in anything that improves our environmental stewardship at airports is a positive thing. I don't necessarily like following Europe and even some U.S. states in what we do in Canada, because I think we should lead, not follow. I think the use of any non-flying, non-gas burning alternative is a positive, monsieur. I think simulators are certainly an answer, and I think simulators, even the use of simulators and ground school elements can help us get over, sort of the Air Canada, national carrier pilot accessibility with respect to fatigue. Yes, those companies don't want their pilots doing flight time in their 4 days off or number of days off, but non-flying, more systems and aids related flying with simulators and the like can serve a lot of purposes. It's a lot safer, it's a lot cleaner, and we do have access then to more available labor pool in terms of flight instruction. I'm sorry about speaking to electric airplanes. It's not an area of expertise that I have.
Merci.
30 seconds, Mr. Aubin.
OK. Très rapidement.
Very quickly, and I hope we'll have an opportunity to hear you elaborate on this topic, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on the new agreement with Quebec vis-a-vis the digital development of pilots. The question is directed at Mr. Armstrong.
I'm not exactly familiar with which agreement you're talking about, unless you're referring to the agreement that we have established with both the Quebec government and the federal government in terms of innovating and the digital investments that we are making in digitizing training. I think the biggest change that's happened over the last, let's say, decade has been a significant advancement in the science of learning and education, and applying the evolution of that science and learning to understanding better how to apply assets at various points along a flight training curriculum or pilot training curriculum. And so the whole concept of saying, can you create a system whereby you have a more efficient, more optimized, more tailored program to actually build people up to a level of competence can be done with things other than aircraft.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. On to Mr. Secan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to start off 4 minutes with my question to Mr. Ogden. You kind of hit some political trigger words for me, international and you choose Canada. And I often like to amalgamate the two. You said the enemy for flight schools was attrition. Why is it that we can't turn to the international community and bring in trainers from the international community to help train Canadian pilots?
The concept, Ms. Sicken, is a very good one. We have looked and we are looking at establishing an international element to the flight school we have. It will come down to the age-old recognition of standards and credentials that we face in many fields in Canada. I'm not really up for lowering standards, but I am for recognizing standards. And if international students and international flight instructors can fill that necessary gap for us, and all we have to do is match the accreditations, then that's on us. Let's do it, because the solutions it provides are geometric in their impact.
Thank you. I do have less time than normal, so I'm going to move on to Ms. Super. You were mentioning the price on pollution and how that affects the operating cost of operation. If smaller flight schools or airlines were to be excluded in an initial program, but the larger carriers were, priced, but then given a rebate as they improved technology or became more efficient and had less of an impact on the environment, is this a system that you think would be favorable?
I can't hardly hear you.
Oh, sorry. So you were mentioning carbon and, how things can be taxed and how that affects operation. If smaller carriers or flight schools were excluded initially, but larger ones, had a tax, but then were given a rebate as they became more efficient or lowered their carbon footprint, is this a model that you think would be favorable?
Yes, as technology improves, with, for instance, simulation or with the electric aircraft, they're not really at the stage where they're feasible to use for a flight school. They don't last long. The charge doesn't last long enough. Flight schools are required to have a minimum of 150 nautical mile cross country for ab initio students, beginning students, and I don't believe there's any electric aircraft that can do that yet. I think that would be feasible if we could come up with something like that. The simulation, there needs to be, in my estimation, changes to the regulations on the amount of simulation that can be used. That, if that were possible, that would greatly aid it. For a commercial pilot, you need basically 25 hours of simulator of instrument time, of which only 10 can be used in a flight training device or a simulator. If we could up the hours that are used in a simulator, that would greatly help and obviously reduce our carbon footprint.
Jump in and quickly ask Ms. Bell a quick question with the 30 seconds I have left. If the government was to subsidize training to help students become pilots, but then they had a return of service that they had to serve in Canada or maybe Canadian Airlines, is this something that's possible, or would that be open to something like that?
Absolutely. I think that one of the recommendations is that there be some student loan forgiveness for time spent as a flight instructor or flying in northern and remote communities. These are two areas where certainly you've heard a lot about how the schools are having trouble retaining instructors, but also I have a fear here in the province of British Columbia that one of the first places where we're going to see the drop off in our pilots is in those areas that are servicing our remote communities. And I have a fear that we are going to see some unfortunate incidents happen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bell. On to Mr. Fuhr.
Thank you all for coming today. I wanted to thank Ms. Bell. I used your letter. I got dozens of letters that were written to me on this topic, and I used yours in its entirety in my remarks in the House, so thank you for that. Something that hasn't come up is with the limited capacity that we have, we're losing a significant amount of that due to other entities, foreign entities, buying Canadian flight schools or foreign students coming here to get trained by Canadian flight schools that are then leaving. So I guess I wanted some feedback on that, and perhaps I'd ask you, Ms. Bell, if you could weigh in on that issue.
So certainly in British Columbia, we see a very high level of foreign students. When I speak to my members who are flight training unit operators, they don't see that as a problem in that those students are not taking spots that other students could be taking. More a problem is getting the Canadian students in the pipeline to begin with. And I'm not, you have people there with a flight training unit that may have a different experience, but here in BC, we're just not seeing the uptake. There is further issue. I just wanted to mention something about immigration and bringing pilots in from other countries. We have some of our members who very much would like to do that, but they stumble across immigration rules that require that pilots incoming into Canada not just meet the standards, regulatory standards for being a pilot, but also because there is no real framework for how a pilot is to be hired from offshore. They are considered to be like an engineer, such that hours have to be guaranteed at 40 hours a week, sort of a Monday to Friday type job. And these are not the kind of jobs that people are hiring for. So I just wanted to have an opportunity to throw that out there. But we don't see the intake of foreign students as being a problem or as taking spots that Canadian students otherwise would take.
Thank you for that. Over to Mr. Armstrong. As the military looks at future aircrew training, what that looks like, how that's going to be delivered, do you think that given both the domestic need and the global need for pilots, that it could be structured in a way that it could incorporate some excess capacity to train civilians or accommodate a surge in production of pilots for the military, and when that was no longer needed, weave in civilians? It's complex and it's thinking outside the box, but given where we're at and what we have to do you think that's possible? And how do you think that would look?
Sure. So if you look at NATO flying training in Canada, which is the existing, military flying training program, when it was crafted, it was actually created with the context of international contribution and international involvement from the get-go, right? And that was partly due to try and generate revenue to subsidize the actual cost of operating the training center. The training center is quite, it's expensive because you're operating military aircraft, which have a different price point that you would see on the civil aviation side. Certainly, I think the approach of building tailored flight training programs is what we need to be targeting, right? Because the idea of saying, well, I'm going to have a fixed cost base that I need to operate to be able to deliver a training service. And if I can build that fixed cost base that has variable capacity, then the ability to inject participation by other students, whether or not that's civilian or whether or not that's from foreign nations, absolutely goes a long way in terms of being able to subsidize or amortize that cost, I should say, not subsidize it. Certainly I think the mindset that we need to have as Canadians, and this is certainly something that we see within our company and the success we've had globally, is that the solution to these problems involve a global mindset, right? If we look at anything in isolation of the complete ecosystem of pilot training, then you're only looking at one piece of the problem, and the solution is much larger than that. Even the conversation about, are foreign students into Canada creating problems, or is it possible to bring, foreign instructors in to supplement Canadian instructors? Think about it in the inverse. The demand that we see for pilot production and pilot training requirements is so high globally that it is creating a draw on Canadian capacity, right? So I go back to what the other members have said and suggest, we really need to focus on a few things. One is building tailored competency-based training programs, and two, really focusing and emphasizing on the ability to recruit active students.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Thank you, Mr. Fuhr. On to Ms. Block for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I do want to thank you and appreciate the committee's indulgence as I take a few moments to move a motion regarding aviation safety that was circulated to the members of the committee on January 2nd. And I'll give you a bit of backstory. Nearly 2 years ago, on June 8th, 2017, 21-year-old Alex, along with his girlfriend Sydney, rented a single-engine Piper Warrior from a flight school in Lethbridge, Alberta, and headed for Kamloops, BC. Alex, being a certified pilot, flew the light aircraft with Sydney as the sole passenger. After refueling in Cranbrook, they departed but never arrived at their destination. An 11-day search was conducted over a vast area. During this 11-day period, 18 Royal Canadian Air Force and Civil Search and Rescue aircraft flew a total of 576 hours and covered approximately 37,513 square kilometers. On average, 10 aircraft were deployed each day with more than 70 Royal Canadian Air Force personnel and 137 volunteer pilots and spotters from Civil Search and Rescue. Despite this extensive search and rescue mission, they were unable to find Alex, Sydney, and their aircraft. It was at the end of this extensive search that Alex's father and stepmother, Matthew Simons and Natalie Lindgren, were notified that the emergency locator transmitter, the ELT, on board the aircraft failed to activate, thus making the plane impossible to find. Sadly, this happens in 38% of crashes. ELTs are emergency transmission devices that are carried on board most aircraft. In the event of a crash, ELTs send distress signals on designated frequencies to help search and rescue locate the aircraft and its passengers. ELTs operate on 2 frequencies, 1 to 1.5 megahertz and 406 megahertz. Since 2009, ELTs that operate at 121.5 megahertz are no longer monitored by satellite systems and are therefore ineffective. However, they are still mandated. Since June of 2016, the Transportation Safety Board has put forward 7 recommendations with regard to modernizing ELTs, but to date, these recommendations have not been acted upon. In many aircraft accidents, the ELT, if there is one, is damaged to the point that no distress signal can be sent. As a result, a number of light aircraft are never found. This was the case for Alex and Sydney, and it's the case for many others like them. With this motion, I believe that we have the opportunity to help grieving parents like Matthew and Natalie by undertaking a short study that will help us better understand the issue and make recommendations to Transport Canada. In particular, the motion requests that the committee look at the benefits for search and rescue purposes of using GPS technology that allows an aircraft position to be determined via satellite navigation and periodically broadcasted to a remote tracking system. The idea is that a GPS would be used in conjunction with a modern 406 megahertz ELT on light aircraft. The chair of the Transportation Safety Board, Kathy Fox, has pointed out that when an aircraft crashes, it needs to be located quickly so that survivors can be rescued. The information that a simple GPS system could provide would empower search and rescue to respond quickly when a crash occurs and would reduce lengthy searches for lost aircraft, thus saving lives and tax dollars. In closing, together I believe we have the opportunity to initiate a very important study in honor of Alex and Sydney, and I hope that all members of the committee would support this motion. Thank you so much for allowing me to take this time.
You're welcome, Ms. Block. I have a couple of speakers, and please note the time, and the next committee meeting is prepared to come in at 1, so our time is very tight. So I have Mr. Graham and Mr. Oban and Ms. Leach. Please keep your comments brief.
I understand your motion and your intent, and I think if we look at the intent of the motion, it is quite frankly to improve methods to ensure recovery of missing aircraft. That's the objective, right? The motion is very prescriptive. I can't support the motion the way it's written, but I will be willing to propose an amendment. I have looked at your motion here. Are you ready for an amendment? Okay. That the committee conduct a study for the duration of 4 to 6 meetings on, that's what you have. And from the colon all the way through A3, we'd replace that with improved methods to ensure recovery of missing aircraft, particularly in general aviation. And I'd further amend it to remove within 4 months because we have quite a bit on the agenda for this committee at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Oban?
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, this is a relevant topic, and I'm not going to object to this motion. What I would like to know, however, is if, in your opinion, this study follows up organically with what we have on our agenda. There we had a passenger and freight train study that's been waiting on the shelves for months and months, and that was agreed to unanimously by this committee. So if this study was shelved, and well, if we were to slot this committee in afterwards, that would be fine. But I don't want to put it before what we'd already agreed to do.
Yes, we do have a full schedule. There's no question. We have supplementary estimates coming up. We have to finish off 2 other reports. We have committed to 4 meetings for the bus safety and a couple of meetings on the rail safety. So those are things we've already committed to. So I would suggest that if the committee adopts either of the motions, that it would start at when we've completed what we currently have on the agenda. Yes.
Ce que nous avons
So what we have on the order paper already includes the rail transport study, is that correct?
Yes. All right. Okay. Ms. Leach.
Thank you very much. And I'm commenting on this, I guess, from my perspective of being a former Minister of Labour. I had heard from many families, as well as pilots and other professionals within the industry, the need for safety regulations, but also specifically for technology that would augment the safety and the ability for not just families, but also the professionals working in the area to be able to modernize the industry. And the one thing I will say is that industry modernization is required. This case being evidence alone, let alone the other cases that have taken place. And we as Canadians use GPS every day. You know, my brother and sister, Melanie and Michael, use it to make sure that they know where their children are, let alone that we could use this to make sure that families that have experienced what they have, similar to Alex and Sydney's families, to be able to find their loved ones, hopefully so that we can actually rescue them and take care of them in a hospital facility, but if nothing else, for those families to have closure. And so I would encourage, I recognize that there's an amendment on the floor with regards to this motion, but the use of modern technology like GPS and others, I think, is something that is fundamental to this motion. And I would encourage the government to consider that those specific pieces of technology that we use every single day, I'm sure you use it in your car to get home on occasion, are things that we should be encouraging and facilitating for pilots and other people in the aviation industry.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leach. Mr. Graham?
My only point is that having the study include its conclusion is not how a study works. And so the study is how do we improve the recovery, not here's a solution, figure out. And that's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Okay, we need to call for a vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment moved by Mr. Graham. Okay. The amendment carries. The motion as amended, please raise your hands. Okay, it carries. Thank you all very much. If we can exit the room very quickly, because the other committee only has an hour for its meeting.